Hey everyone, Abu here with a small note before you start this episode. You're about to listen to part one of a two-part Fremen conversation. Leo and I ended up having way more to say than we thought we would about the Fremen and their history and their place in the Dune universe. So we broke it up into two easy-to-digest episodes. All right, here's the episode.
Today on the show, we just got back from the Siege orgy. We're a little high on spice, and we're in the mood for some pillow talk.
Welcome to Gom Jabbar, your guide to the iconic world of Dune. We'll be exploring the themes, philosophies, and characters found in the sandy depths of this vast universe, from Frank Herbert's groundbreaking novels to the adaptations on film and TV. My name's Abu.
And my name's Leo.
And Leo, we're finally doing it.
Oh my God.
We're talking about the Fremen today. Yeah.
We've talked about this episode offline so many times, and to be frank, it's intimidating because there's a lot to say about the Fremen. And before I say too much, because there's just a lot of things I want to make sure I don't accidentally say before our disclaimer.
Right.
This is going to be a very spoiler-heavy episode up through about God Emperor of Dune. So this is the first 4 novels of Frank Herbert's original book series.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's pretty important to note that right now, just because some of what we talk about will absolutely spoil a first watching or reading of Dune. So 100% be aware. If you haven't read through about God Emperor of Dune, know that we are talking about some things that will probably impact that experience.
Yes, definitely. I'm glad you said that right off the bat. I was just thinking that too. I was afraid to say anything more about the Fremen in the intro because anything we say today is probably going to be a massive spoiler. So be warned. But if you're a big Dune fan like us, or if you're rereading the novels and you need a refresher, today's episode is all about the Fremen.
Yeah.
It's all about the Zensunni Migration, something that's mentioned multiple times in the novels and literally never explained.
Right. In classic Frank Herbert style.
Exactly.
Mentioned hundreds of times, not even remotely explored.
Right. So that's what we're going to do today. Luckily, the Dune Encyclopedia goes to great lengths to explore the Zensunni Migration. We're going to touch on that. We're going to get into who the Zensunni are, their culture, how they tie into the Fremen. And then we're going to talk about the rise and fall of the Fremen, which I think is really interesting and tragic and extreme and a lot of other adjectives that we'll touch on today. But super interesting stuff. I've personally been looking forward to this episode for a while because the Fremen are so integral to the story, right? The Fremen are intrinsically tied with Arrakis, with Dune, and with the fate of the Atreides.
Totally.
With Paul's rise to power and, ultimately his fall. None of that is possible. None of the history of Dune and Arrakis is possible without the Fremen. They're so integral to the universe and to this story. So I was excited to actually get into it today.
Yo, Jessica and Paul would have just died in the desert, eaten by sandworms. 100% end of the story. Dune, 200 pages long, done. The other thing that I'll say about today's episode before we dive into specifics is we are going to be talking about a lot that even having read as much as I have, I didn't know a lot of this stuff. And then this is maybe a theme with our podcast where we're uncovering these vast depths that don't necessarily exist.
Yeah, the character arc for us in this podcast is actually realizing how little we know.
Right. It's sort of a spiritual journey, right? The other thing that's worth mentioning about today's episode in particular, we cannot cover everything that there is to cover about the Zensunni. And I want to stress the encyclopedia.
Yeah.
It's got 40 pages on the Fremen culture.
Not an overstatement.
Not literally.
Quite possibly an understatement.
It might be more than that. There's an entire chapter on Fremen textiles.
Yep.
There's like a 3-page section on Fremen menstruation.
A 3-page, 2-column section.
Yeah, 2 columns. This is not your granddad's single column page. This is dense.
No.
Very information dense as well. Very little fluff. And we just simply can't talk about all of that. But I think looking at today's topic and looking at what we're going to talk about, I think what we've done, and a lot of this was your work, Abu, is we've successfully taken this massive journey and kind of boiled it down to a really interesting arc that highlights why they are the way they are, you know?
If you're looking for a super deep dive into the Fremen, this episode might not be it, but we're going to try and follow some sort of logical arc of their history and culture.
We're just doing our best, man.
We're just doing our best. Yeah, this is a long-winded way of saying, what the fuck do you expect of us?
Yeah.
We have an hour.
So, okay. All of the Zensunni, the Fremen, everything, the whole arc, boiled down, what would you say is the, theme that you sort of took away from all of your research?
I think the theme, and we're going to touch on this at the end of the episode, is manipulation.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. If I could say it in just one word, the entire history of the Zensunni/Fremen was manipulation. They were manipulated from the first pages of Dune history, at least recorded in the encyclopedia.
Right.
And they continue to be manipulated until, quite literally, they go extinct under the reign of Leto II. And that is something we want our listeners to keep in mind here. Think about the way the Zensunni culture is shaped by outside forces, by this manipulation.
And inside manipulation. Like, I am baffled at the amount of internal, and I will say, yeah, the Fremen people, like the mass populace, is 100% manipulated by forces. But sometimes those forces come from within their own organization. And that's another theme that I see evolving in Dune, the more I learn about it and the more I look at it, whether it's the Bene Gesserit or Paul's vision of the Golden Path and his avoidance of it, Leto II's grand plan of becoming the tyrant, etc., etc. Seeing all of these threads of people pulling strings, it's then a little bit shocking to see who I thought was purely victim, you know, the Zensunni people as purely victims, seeing their Sayadinas manipulating them pretty early on in their history and manipulating their narrative to draw out a sort of cultural power is surprising. But God, you were so, spot on. Manipulation's a great theme for the Fremen people. It's also just extreme, right? Like nothing about the Zensunni journey and the Fremen people is like vanilla, easy peasy, lemon squeezy.
No, these people live on the extremities.
Yeah. There's a reason in one-on-one combat that Fremen can kill Sardaukar.
Yeah.
And that's not a coincidence. This isn't like, well, whoops. This is like a byproduct of their journey and their path.
Yeah.
So let's talk about their origins. Yeah, let's talk about their roots. Where'd they come from?
Yeah, so having set up that theme, let's get into the Zensunni. Who are they?
Yeah.
So let's go back in time, tens of thousands of years before the Dune novel, the first Dune novel.
As we always do, sure.
As we always do, of course. And let's visit Old Terra.
Oh, heard of it.
Which might be a planet, we might be familiar with. It's Earth. And the Zensunni are basically a splinter group in Earth. This is still future Earth, by the way. We're not talking like 2009.
Right.
So in a couple hundred years in the future, let's say. The Zensunni are a splinter group that broke off from this religion that was following this prophetic figure named Maometh.
Yeah.
And Maometh was considered somewhat like the third Muhammad. So the prophet Muhammad.
He was like a messiah, right?
Yeah, definitely a messiah. And my assumption here is that Maometh and the religion that Maometh was leading was very Islamic in nature, or at least had many of its roots in Islam. And we'll see that throughout Zensunni culture, and we'll see that even bleed into Fremen culture in the future, this very Arabic Islamic base. So the Zensunni are actually people who broke off from Maometh's religion, and they develop their own teachings and doctrines under the leadership of someone named Ali ben Ohashi. A little factoid here. Some reports indicate that his doctrines that he wrote, this new Zensunni doctrine that broke off from Mahomet, might have actually just been authored by his second wife, Nisai ben Ohashi.
Yeah.
So more power to her.
Yeah, hashtag feminism.
Yeah. And now I'm starting to question who actually wrote Dune, Frank. Was it Beverly?
Frank's second wife.
So the Zensunni effectively here break off from this religion thanks to this doctrine written down by Nisai ben Ohashi. And their culture is, like I was saying earlier, very much adapts from two sort of modern cultures that we know today. One, Islam, of course. That's where sort of the Sunni part comes from. Sunni in modern times is a sect of Islam. There's Sunni and Shia. Sunni is the larger of the sects. And then the other part of their name, Zen, comes from Buddhism, sort of the Zen philosophy.
Right.
And of course, that's reflected in their name, the Zensunni, but that's also sort of what their culture ends up adapting, and that's sort of their roots.
It's worth mentioning that the way the encyclopedia frames this is that some scholars, quote unquote, believe that this is sort of the origin of the name, but there are no other explanations for where this name comes from. And it seems almost, when you start looking at the culture and the practices and the philosophies of the Zensunni people, it seems almost heavy-handedly obvious.
Right. Yeah, a little on the nose.
Yeah. So they believed, and again, when we're talking about this idea of extremeness, the Zensunni believed they owed absolutely zero allegiance to any secular government ever.
I'm there with them.
Yeah, I'm getting there. So they preferred to live these sort of tribal nomadic lives, and often ended up in these sort of harsh, isolated environments away from dense governed areas like city centers, like an area, and I think this is even mentioned in the encyclopedia, right? This like in the Sahara Desert, right? Mm-hmm. Harsh, unforgiving, and again, kind of an on-the-nose precursor to times to come.
Right.
But this idea of they are extremely devout religious practitioners, and they do not believe in owing any form of allegiance to government.
Yeah, and particularly secular government.
Yes, absolutely. So really, two very, very important things to know about them as we move into their journey from their totally willing journey off
I was going to say journey? That's the word you're going with, Leo?
Yeah, their vacation from their fun in the sun. No, their forceful removal from old Terra, which comes at sort of an, inevitably when we think about discovering planets, this is a way that it could be handled. But I thought this was so interesting in the encyclopedia, this sort of gifting of habitable planets. Yeah,
super interesting stuff. And I'll try to, again, boil down a double-columned, many-paged explanation from the encyclopedia into just a couple of minutes here. But so now that we've established, this is Zensunni culture, this is sort of their origin, this is where they came from on old Terra. Now let's move into the phase of their migration, their journey. And this is a period of time where humanity is expanding out into the universe, colonizing other planets. And there's something you don't really think about when we talk about sci-fi and other planets. How do you get people there, right? You need a workforce on that planet. How do you get people to colonize?
Right.
I don't know about you, Leo, but I'm not up and rearing to go to Mars anytime soon. I'm comfortable here on Earth. I like the gravity. And
that's number one on my list too. Yeah, gravity. It's things I love about Earth. Man, that sweet gravity.
That sweet gravity. Look, when I drop something, I know it's going to fall.
It's reliable. Old Faithful is what we call it.
So this idea of colonizing a planet is really interesting. And the issue that a lot of houses in the Imperium run into is when they let's say you discover a new planet. And it's lush, and there's plenty of farmland, and it's definitely a planet that you could profit off of. How do you get your people there? Right. Well, that's expensive. Colonizing a planet is expensive. So what a lot of houses ended up doing is when they discovered a planet, they would, quote unquote, gift it to the emperor,
right,
and relinquish all responsibility of it.
Now, I read that there was a finder's fee, or like the Empire would like reward them for giving planets.
Yes, that too. So there was a little cash money involved.
Yeah, so they like dodged the bullet of having to supply a workforce and like move a ton of their civilians to this shitty uninhabited planet, but also they like got some money and then didn't have the responsibility anymore. But yeah, exactly. Now the Empire has the responsibility.
Right. And at this point, you might be thinking, wait a second, the government's going to pay to have to deal with all of this work of setting up a new planet?
No.
No. See, the government can do something called draft people.
Yeah. Have you heard of it?
So this actually totally works out for the Emperor, right? Like other houses who don't want to deal with setting up a whole new planet, you just pay them a nominal fee. Now you just got a planet.
Right.
And it's under your control, and it's a way of, again, expanding your imperial power and, working with the houses in like almost a non-combative way to earn more and more planets. It puts the impetus of like, you guys discover them, I will pay for them because I'm rich as fuck. I'm the Emperor. So it actually totally works out for the Emperor. And because he's the Emperor, he can do something that he did on the planet Poritrin. So Poritrin is an example of a planet that was discovered by a house who didn't want to deal with the responsibility of populating it. So they gift it to the Emperor. And the Emperor decides, okay, cool, let's populate this planet with 2 million people from Old Terra. So he goes to the governor of Old Terra and demands that the governor give him 2 million people to help colonize this new planet Poritrin that he was just gifted.
The residents of Old Terra have been effectively immune from this draft process because Old Terra is like the cradle of humanity. And there's this sort of reverence for this planet and the people on the planet. But this fucking emperor comes along. This is Emperor Elrud V, is like, you know what? Enough's enough. Let's get some Old Terrans, and not just some of them. You said the number 2 million people, which is like a baffling number of people to just suddenly lose. And the governor is, and this is always the case, right? The governor's in a shitty place because he has to now select a number of people and say, hey, congratulations. You get to go to a planet that no one wants, right? And now this is also like a people, the Old Terran population is a people who have never had to deal with this draft reality before.
Like imagine the unrest, imagine the protests that the governor is potentially facing.
Right.
But he comes up with a pretty creative workaround.
He's flex tape. We're talking about Baron Mikkerel, who is the sort of planetary governor, is in this crappy situation, but he figures out a kind of creative solution utilizing this kind of thorn in his side, the Zensunni people.
Right. Remember a couple of minutes ago when we said there was a whole group of people who thought they owed no allegiance to any government?
Governments hate that.
Governments don't like that.
Yeah.
So Mikkerel here is like, Baron Mikkerel is like, yo, okay, 2 million people. How about I make all 2 million of these annoying Zensunni on my planet who already think they don't owe any allegiance to me? So he killed 2 birds with 1 stone there.
Yeah.
He completed his obligation to the Emperor and provided actually over than 2 million. There were more than 2 million Zensunni.
It was like 2.5, right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
So he overachieved. That made the Emperor extra happy. Kind of a stroke of genius, if an evil one.
Right.
But he forces these 2.5 million Zensunni people to uproot from Old Terra and dumps them on Poritrin, and they have to start their lives anew.
Now, it's not all super bad, because Poritrin, for what it's worth, was like a lush, very easily cultivated planet that they very quickly began to turn around in a really big way.
Yeah.
And, it's described as a soft planet, and they are able to, much easier than, say, living in the Sahara Desert, they now have this almost free time as they're growing their culture. And this is across, as all things in Dune, this is across hundreds of years and like multiple generations and stuff.
Yes. Yep.
In this free time, their religious leaders and the Sayadina, the oral storytellers and history keepers of their people, start working their doctrines and start reworking and cultivating their kind of myths and philosophies and, superstitions and beliefs while they're on this planet. And within not a long time, there are Zensunni people being born on Porotrin with the absolute belief that Porotrin is their home world, where the Zensunni people began.
Right.
And this is really important because they don't stay on Porotrin forever. Spoiler alert, they're going to go somewhere else, as we all kind of know. But this story of a people displaced from their home is now redoable. They have a new chance to be displaced from their home because now they have a new home. And this isn't just, this is the house we live in now. For a lot of Zensunni, Porotrin is their originating spot in the cosmos.
Right,
this is the origin of the Zensunni.
Yeah, think back to our theme, manipulation. The Saiyadina here decide, okay, we got kicked off Old Terra, whatever. Let's change our culture or in our oral traditions and sort of our myths and legends and make Porotrin our home. And of course, this happens over generations. We're not talking like next week the Saiyadina Club got together and decided let's erase all the history books. Yeah. This happened over hundreds and hundreds of years, many generations, and over this time, these new Zensunni, you could even call them these sort of quote unquote soft Zensunni because they've now lived on this lush, beautiful, water-rich planet. They very quickly start forming communities and towns. They drop their nomadic lifestyle that they were living in places like the Sahara Desert on Old Terra. Over these generations, they abandoned many of their old sort of nomadic, tough, independent ways and built this new, softer lifestyle. And
they expected, with these towns and these settlements, there's a clear demonstration in their beliefs that they expected to be on this planet for a long time. And the new mythos created by the Saiyadina was that the Zensunni would be on this planet, Porotrin, forever until they've answered these sort of 1,000 religious questions of existence, which has a name that I'm forgetting at this moment. But they'll be on this planet until they're ready for this final migration to their end point, the Holy Land, the Promised Land.
I mean, this is like a story that's told in many major religions, right? Like this idea of a displaced people who will earn their right to a Promised Land at the end of the tunnel. And that's similar to the myth that the Saiyadina are telling these Zensunni who are now calling Porotrin their home.
And it works perfectly. They're there forever and totally comfortable, and the story's over, right?
Yeah, the end. Okay, we'll see you on the next episode of Gone.
Okay, thanks for listening.
Absolutely not what happens. The reality is that these new Zensunni begin to get very comfortable on this planet. And in the year 4492, the motherfucking Sardaukar show up.
Ugh, heard of them.
2 episodes ago. 3 episodes, maybe? I'm losing track. So the Sardaukar show up in 4492, and these raiders decide that the Zensunni need to be moved once again. And the reason for that is because House Alexan decides they really like Porotrin. That's nice. A good property. Yeah. It's worth a lot.
Look at it. It's beautiful.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. So House Alexan is like, yo, we want to move into Porotrin. Can you get these
dibs?
And can you move these pesky Zensunni out of here?
So annoying.
So the Sardaukar do just that. They show up, these raiders show up, and so it's not just all bloodshed. It's a mix of some military conflicts of relocating the Zensunni.
Right.
But a lot of it is actually feeding into this myth that, Leo, you just explained, this idea that once we have answered these 1,000 philosophical religious questions, we will be ready for the next and final step of our journey to the Promised Land. The raiders fed into that myth and convinced many Zensunni to come voluntarily.
Oh my God, am I sensing today's theme?
You are. You are sensing today's theme of manipulation.
Oh, manipulation. That's the theme. That's what they're doing right now. That sucks.
Yeah. So it's like, hey, good job. You passed the quiz. 1,000 questions answered. Right. Me, Mr. Raider, let me take you to the Promised Land. Come with me. Don't worry about the shackles.
No ulterior motives.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a mix of that. There are some resistant Zensunni, of course, who are like, wait, we don't want to leave. But then it's also a mix of feeding into the myth and convincing a large portion of them to come. So the Zensunni are divided into 2 other planets where they're sent. One is a planet called Beta Tegus.
This is a word that I have nightmares about.
Just looked at and decided, nope.
We're going to say it wrong. But listen, we here at Gom Jabbar are nothing if not bold. Beta Tegus.
Beta Tegus. So half the Zensunni population is sent to Beta Tegus, and the other half of this Poratran population is sent to a little property, Leo, you might have heard of.
Which one?
Salusa Secundus?
Oh, shit. That place sucks. It's the worst planet.
So the Zensunni are once again sort of displaced. Their people are forced out. Like, you have to assume families are split here, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Like, someone's cousin ended up on Salusa Secundus. And that's heartbreaking to think.
It's heartbreaking. And also, bear in mind, a lot of the Zensunni... So some of the Zensunni are sort of swept away with this manipulation of, this is the pilgrimage. Yay, cool. But there are a lot of Zensunni who believe 100% that they originated on Poratran, that this is literally their homeworld.
Yes.
And, man, I mean, Beta Tegus is not terrible. It's kind of an okay place. Salusa Secundus...
A downgrade.
Downgrade, yeah.
They were in business class, and the only seats that were open were the fucking cargo hold.
Was being shot out of the airplane into a volcano. So they went from business class to being thrown into the engines of the plane. So not great. Not
great at all. Yeah, so if stage 1 of the Zensunni migration was Poratran, their displacement from Old Terra to Poratran, stage 2 is Beta Tegus and Salusa. And this chapter of the Zensunni migration is where things start to go not great. So Salusa Secundus, of course, is horrible. We did an extremely in-depth deep dive on the Sardaukar and Salusa Secundus in a previous episode. So I don't think we'll hammer too hard on that today, but Suffice it to say, Salusa Secundus, horrible planet, most people die.
Yeah, death rate of people on that planet is absurd.
Yeah. It's crazy. And imagine being someone who's not even native to that planet and just showing up. Like, the death rate among your people is going to be absolutely wild. But we know the Zensunni are a fiercely independent and adaptable group. And so they adapt on Salusa Secundus. And in fact...
Really quickly, too.
Very quickly.
Within a generation or two, they were almost matching native Salusa Secundus residents in their survival ratings.
Yeah, as far as like survival rate. Yeah, absolutely incredible. And they revert back to many of their older tradition, like nomadic traditions, their fiercely independent and self-reliant traditions. That is what they have to do on Salusa Secundus to survive. And they do it. They're the Zensunni. They're adaptable. Whatever is thrown at them, they will figure it out. And they do. And over the next couple of generations, they become quite the thorn in the side of the Sardaukar and the Emperor.
Yeah.
The Sardaukar attempt many times to assimilate or convert the Zensunni into their people. The Zensunni are like, nope, fuck you. The Emperor tries to, squash any sort of rebellion and, again, assimilate, sort of wash out the Zensunni and just make them Sardaukar proper. No. The Zensunni continue to be this annoying thorn in the side of the Sardaukar and the Emperor.
Super quick anecdote. As part of this attempt to convert and use the strength of this Zensunni people who are demonstrating that they're super resilient, there were instances of Zensunni people being like, sure, I'll join the Sardaukar.
Oh, yeah, this is good, yeah.
And then they are trained and they're doing great. And the Sardaukar are like, wow, I guess they're really serious about this whole Sardaukar thing.
They're like drinking buddies with Joe the Sardaukar and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, Joe Sardaukar. Yeah. And so they're like drinking, they're hanging out, they're like doing all the things, and they're like, well, these guys, they're one of us. That's great. Okay, time for weapons training. So they pass out weapons, and then just immediately the Zensunni kills everyone in the room and then kills themselves. And it's like, I don't mean to make light of this sort of gesture.
Yeah.
The Sardaukar are not blameless victims in all of this. So to see this subjugated, imprisoned, powerless, quote unquote, population of displaced travelers hitting back in that vicious,
right,
kind of incredible way.
Like Joe, that Bud Light we shared meant nothing.
They have Budweiser Light on Seleucia Secundus?
They have exclusively Bud Light Lime on Seleucia Secundus.
That is the worst planet.
The worst of all beers.
Today, very clearly not sponsored by Bud Light Lime.
You can't get anything else on tap. It's just fountains of Bud Light Lime.
Fucking worst. Wow. I'd rather drink water.
Truly. Awful. But the Zensunni, so they survived this Bud Light Lime life. and they survive it enough to be annoying enough to the Emperor that the Emperor's just like, okay, I can't take this anymore. Yeah. This is incredibly annoying. My Sardaukar are literally getting killed by Zensunni. I need to move them. So, I guess we just do now.
Yeah.
The Emperor's like, move these guys to another planet.
Get them out of here.
And they do. Yeah. So these Zensunni on Seleucia are then transplanted once again to a planet called Aishia. And we'll return to that in a bit, because we need to talk about the other half of the Zensunni from Porotrin, the ones that were sent to Bela Tagus, which, Leo, I'm just realizing I'm pretty sure I spent the entire beginning of this episode mispronouncing.
Oh my God. Yeah, we did. We said Beta Tagus. Okay, to be fair, there's a lot of planets.
So many planets.
A lot of planets. Okay, for the record, it's Bela Tagus.
Bela Tagus.
Yeah. Okay,
yes.
So it's Bela Tagus.
Yeah.
If you re-listen to this episode, just pretend we said that earlier.
Right.
So this other chunk of Zensunni that were sent to Bela Tagus is on this planet, which is actually kind of similar to Porotrin. And over about 800 years, they kind of return to their Porotrin habits of like building communities. They're not really nomadic. They're farming. They're cultivating the land. They have learned kind of a lesson about all of this. On Porotrin, they built these like villages all over the planet, just super spread out, using the space, enjoying the planet. And that really left them open for the raiders that came. So on Bela Tagus, they build much more condensed kind of cities that have retaining walls, and they're more guarded, and they're more like set up to defend themselves against outside forces, which would work if they had any concept of how powerful the Sardaukar are, because unfortunately, after about 800 years of relatively peaceful life on Bela Tagus, the Sardaukar show up. Yay!
Yeah, like their mentality here on this planet was very much like, divide and relocate my people once, shame on me.
Right.
And they were ostensibly prepared for it again, but again, we talked about this in our Sardaukar episode. No one can match the Sardaukar, no matter how prepared you are. They are the best fighters in the galaxy. And like you said, they descend once again on the Zensunni people here.
The fight is pretty pathetic. It's over pretty much immediately.
Right.
And the Sardaukar relocate them to two places, Rosik and Harmonthep. And the raiders took the Zensunni from Porotrin because of one reason. It was going to be the home world to this house.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's a sort of two-pronged reason. The first reason is that these two planets that they're sent to, Rosik and Harmonthep, are young. They need more working people. They need more hands on deck to build up the colonies. The second reason is the Sardaukar had to kind of occasionally be used for these sort of violent means so that they wouldn't lose their edge. I also a little bit suspect that the Sardaukar need to have the reputation for they end fights immediately and they're really powerful.
Right.
What an easy 3-point shot, right?
Right. Like go beat up the people that have been relocated and beat up multiple times for generations.
Right.
Like that's an easy dunk for the Sardaukar.
It's a big W, just very easily won, and adds to the, again, this wasn't said in the encyclopedia, but as I was reading it, I saw this as a pretty clear, did they really anticipate this being like a hard-fought battle?
No.
I don't think so. And what's another benefit to sending the Sardaukar to an easy win? Well, now the Sardaukar have one more battle that they've won undefeated.
Yeah, builds up their myth, makes them scary.
Yeah. absolutely. Reminds people of the power of the Sardaukar.
Yeah. But think about that. And we're sort of flippantly talking about these two reasons, but like, think about this from the Zensunni perspective.
Right.
Your entire people who have already been displaced multiple times are once again families torn apart, cities torn apart, communities torn apart, just because the Sardaukar need practice.
Right. Terrible.
Or just because the Emperor's like, Rosik and Harmonthep are doing well, but we could probably use with a couple million more people. How about we move these people again, who we know we can easily move because we so overpower them? That like makes my blood boil.
Yeah, that's terrible.
I don't think any reason would be justified, of course, but these reasons of all reasons are not justifications for...
These are especially shitty reasons.
once again, uprooting the Zensunni and destroying their lives. And it's this sort of persecution happens over and over and over again. And the entire Zensunni migration is just this cycle repeating. The Empire or the Sardaukar deciding, hey, these people are in our way, move them. Or, hey, we need these people for slave labor, for a workforce, for a colony, move them. And the Zensunni are never able to stop this. They can't break this cycle, at least for a few more generations. It's pretty horrific. Like, I really want to put that in perspective for us, that from the Zensunni perspective, every couple of generations, your people are getting absolutely torn apart and thrown into slavery or thrown onto other planets they know nothing about. It's horrific.
And even if individual Zensunni don't remember that full path, the Sayadina do.
Right. The history keepers do.
The history keepers do, exactly. And this narrative of this keeps happening and we're tired of it is building in a really important way, especially at this moment.
Yeah.
Now, as we talk about these two new planets, Rosik and Harmonthep, Abu, surely all the people sent to Harmonthep do great, right?
Yeah. I think it's a fairy tale planet, and they build up beautiful communities, and they're never
other types of beer, not just Bud Light Lime.
No. They get access to wines.
Whoa, nice.
Yeah, and for all intents and purposes, I think Harmonthep would have been a paradise if it wasn't blown up in 6800 by unknown causes and everyone was wiped out.
Oh, no. That sucks. I mean, when you have, again, all of this sucks. Maybe the theme of today's episode should have been things suck.
Yeah, not manipulation. Everything sucks.
That's a brutal loss on an almost unimaginable scale.
Right.
That sucks. And Rosik is no paradise either, right?
No, certainly not. So think about this journey. This group of Zensunni that we're following at the moment were previously on Old Terra generations ago.
Right.
Then they were on the paradise planet of Poratrin. They were kicked off of that, and they ended up at Bela Tigus, which, if not a paradise, was still...
It was fine.
It wasn't business class, but it was first class. It was fine.
Yeah.
And then now they end up on Rosik. And Rosik was harsh. Right. Maybe not as harsh as Seleucus Secundus, but it is a brutal, harsh planet. And the Zensunni, the people that have come to this, have been forced to this planet, barely survived the first winter. They're almost all nearly wiped out on the first winter because as adaptable as they are, they've now spent thousands of years on two very nice planets. And suddenly they're thrown onto Rosik where they have to learn to survive or they're all about to be wiped out. So they're holding on by a thread on Rosik. They barely survived the first winter. They're trying to adapt, but many of them are dying off quickly. And
there's a lot of starvation because one of the big challenges of Rosik is that there's this very, very short growth period where you really don't have a long season for growing crops. And so there's a ton of starvation.
Yeah.
And this sets up a lot of experimentation with eating local plant life, which coincidentally sets up one of the most significant moments in the entire universe of Dune by a margin, which is when a Sayadina on the verge of starving to death eats a known poisonous plant. She eats it because she's dying. She's one of the oral storytellers of the people. She's a history keeper. She's tremendously important, and yet she takes this risk, and the risk almost pays off. But what happens is she eats this plant, and immediately has access to internal genetic memory. She can remember every Sayadina before her that she's descended from.
Mm-hmm.
And she does end up dying. She overdoses on it and descends into delirium and dies.
Right.
But before she does, she tells other Zensunni people about this effect. And suddenly, the history keepers, these Sayadina, become immeasurably valuable to this nomadic people, right?
Yeah. They become living archives of memory.
Yes, absolutely.
Living archives of the Zensunni history that, of course, over multiple migrations and multiple planets would have changed. Like oral histories, like imagine how that oral history changes. Imagine how history is twisted and shaped, and there's no way that stays consistent. There's no way to actually know your people's history when that continues to happen. But now they do. Because of this poisonous plant, if they take in small doses, the Sayadinas are able to unlock their genetic memory and access it. And imagine what that does to Zensunni culture. Imagine what that would do to our culture now, right? For example, I was telling you this before we started recording. I just finished reading Exhalations by Ted Chiang,
right,
which is an excellent short story collection, all sci-fi short stories. And one of the stories is about how the written word and taking history down on paper completely changed the concept of truth. Before, truth was just whatever your elders in the tribe told you. Now truth could be accessed in written archives. Totally changed culture forever. And then what this short story sort of expanded on and went into the future with in the sci-fi aspect was, what does that mean for us in the modern world when we're starting to sort of record and document our lives online, and storage and video is becoming so easy to record? What would happen if every single person on the planet could easily access a recording of every moment of their lives from the moment they were born to the moment they die? How does that change our relationships? How does that change our concept of history and truth? Imagine that happening to the Zensunni.
Yeah, crazy.
That's mind-blowing. You realize you can access the exact truth of your people, something you didn't have access to for generations and was modified and manipulated, again, that word, over thousands of years. This is truly, I don't think we can understate how truly earth-shattering this discovery is.
This also, by the way, is the first instance, this Sayadina eating the poisonous plant, is the first instance of what we will later refer to as a wild Reverend Mother, which I haven't had a chance yet to look into that term, but I guess it's just a Reverend Mother that occurs outside of the Bene Gesserit training.
That's my assumption as well.
Yeah.
TBD on our Bene Gesserit episode, which we are also very much looking forward to. We keep teasing it, but we'll get around to it eventually. A lot of research has to go into that one. But you're totally right. So these Sayadina, when they take this plant and unlock their genetic memories, then quote unquote graduate into what we will later in the Dune books know as the Reverend Mothers of the Fremen people. So this completely, once again, changes the culture of the Zensunni. And what I love about this is what the Zensunni people do with this new knowledge. Once they know their history, they can plot out their future. How incredible is that?
Right.
The Zensunni up to this point don't have a full picture of their displacement and their treatment by the Empire and how their people have been split and transplanted. And again, these are generations and generations and generations. This isn't something they can access in a history book. Now they can in a living history archive in the Sayadinas. And this is a totally normal and expected response. They decide they've fucking had enough.
Yeah. They're like, we're done with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And once they decide that they're done with that, they start planning this long-term goal to leave Rosuk, and they negotiate with the guild, and they are effectively trying to find a home for themselves. They're trying to find a place where the Zensunni people can go and be away from the Empire and be away from all of the constant attacks by the Sardaukar and their families and communities being torn apart. They've had enough of that. They understand their history now, and they do. They negotiate with the guild, And ultimately, the young generation of Zensunni leave their sort of older parents who can't leave Rasek.
Which is also tragic.
That was like a single sentence in the encyclopedia that hit me so hard.
It's so sad.
There's so much history and emotion behind that one sentence. The young generation left. The old generation literally sacrificed their lives and their futures, knowing that they wouldn't make it through another winter on Rasek for the future of the Zensunni people.
When you have the crazy, crippling cost of guild transportation and working with the guild to move this big group of people, when they're making that decision, they have to take into consideration, we can only afford to bring this number of people. And that's heartbreaking because it's not even, exactly to your point. And what the throwaway sentence in the encyclopedia, they're not just deciding, well, I guess we'll split the people again.
Right.
It's everyone we leave is going to die within a year, probably.
Yeah. It's a truly heartbreaking sentence, and it's, like you said, just a throwaway in the encyclopedia. Something else that actually speaks to their community-based mindset, they haven't forgotten the other Zensunni. Remember a while ago we said there were Zensunni from Seleucus Secundus who went to the planet Aegea?
Yeah.
These Rasek Zensunni don't forget their brethren. On the way to this new planet, so they strike a deal with the guild. The Zensunni get on a guild highliner, and they decide, okay, we're going to this new planet. The guild is like, we got a place for you to go. We'll take you there. On the way, they stop, and they get the Zensunni from Aegea as well. They want to rebuild their community. Again, I love this focus on like, we are a people, and the choices we make collectively affect all of us. And that's pervasive throughout Fremen culture in the books. That comes from this Zensunni mentality of togetherness. And they stop by Aegea. They're like, yo, Aegea Zensunni, get in, bitches. We're going to a new planet. And the guild drops them off in the deserts of Arrakis.
Which, by the way, clutch move, picking up the people in Aegea, because Aegea is like a desolate desert planet.
Yeah.
And Aegea is referenced as sort of the training grounds upon which these incredibly tough Zensunni who were sent there from Seleucus Secundus are now learning survival methods for the desert, combined with now the ability because I don't know if we've mentioned this yet, but the Sayadina who come with the younger generation from Rasek bring with them plants to continue fueling this internal genetic memory.
Yeah.
You combine the powerful survival of the Zensunni who were sent to Seleucus Secundus with the perspective of the Sayadina from Rasek, the new wild Reverend Mothers, and you have this incredible formula for what becomes the Fremen.
Yeah, absolutely. I almost imagine it's like the geeks and the jocks getting together.
Yeah.
Like these
with
softer
bronze.
Zensunni, right? Together we can survive Arrakis. Yeah, so they, like you said, they end up on Arrakis. Like the guild drops them off at Arrakis. They strike a deal with the guild, put us in the deep desert, keep us hidden from Imperial satellites, so it's secret. Again, they have this context now of their history. They're not about to make the same mistakes and allow the Sardaukar to descend upon them. They're not about to make the same mistakes and allow the Empire to displace them once more. They strike a deal with the guild, put us in the deep desert, and we will do the rest and survive and thrive here on Arrakis, however tough it may be.
And provide the guild with access to spice on planet.
Right.
Really a win-win, and sets up...
It's a mutually beneficial agreement here.
Absolutely. And it sets up the power dynamics that Paul and the Atreides enter into when House Atreides is given dominion over Arrakis.
Okay, so this is a pretty good place to stop the conversation. In part 2, Leo and I will dive into the Fremen on Arrakis and their rise and fall throughout Dune history. As always, thank you so much for listening, and as always, we'll see you on the Golden Path.